I'm not going to let my education get in the way of learning new things, because we learn all the time. And the more I learn, I don't know about you, but the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And I think that's one of the things that, for those that don't believe or want to troll this channel or put ridiculous comments in there, you need to wake up. You do need to wake up. I believed it all, and I absolutely was supposed to be the poster boy for the food guidelines, and I guarantee that it didn't work, and it didn't work for me, and it didn't work for the hundreds of people that I trained.
Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant-Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, my friend Stephen. They're calling over from the UK, who goes by Coach Stephen on YouTube. Stephen, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and it's nice to see you again, and your lovely clinical setting there that we spoke about before we started.
my stark white environment. Yeah. It's very clean, as Elle would say, and that's how she likes it. So yeah. That's good. So Stephen, so for people who haven't come across you or your channel, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm 60 in about 3 weeks' time, and I've been a carnivore for 5 years. I'll start with a linear story, if you don't mind, because it took me a long time to realize about eating low carb and keto and then carnivore. When I started off my journey as a teenager, I was a semi-pro soccer player, won a tennis tournament, a singles tennis tournament. I was pretty quick at 800 meters, the 800-meter school record. And this is not to say I'm being big-headed. This is just to say I was really interested in health and fitness. I did a bodybuilding show in my 20s, and I absolutely fell for the food guidelines. Didn't smoke, didn't drink, and did absolutely everything allegedly right. Porridge, or as you call it, oatmeal in the morning, skimmed milk, fruit, veg, no red meat, no saturated fat. So you would imagine that I would be the poster boy for that way of eating. And boy, am I a poster boy for not doing that. Because as I got older, things started to go wrong. I became a personal trainer. Then I became an advanced personal trainer. I trained somebody to get to the Olympics, a guy that was 4 stone overweight and a chain smoker to become one of the top 20% of marathon runners in the world. So I knew my stuff when it came to exercise. I wasn't doing anything other than the right things and allegedly doing the right things for nutrition. But then when I got into my 30s, things started to go a little bit south, and I couldn't really work out what was going on. And then I had an athlete come to me who was type 1 diabetic, and this is where the story starts to take hold of where we're at now. And I was really interested in diabetes, and I wanted to learn more about it. So in the end, I became a specialist practitioner in obesity and diabetes. And I can remember being in the lecture room and them saying about dosing insulin, for instance, that it's all in relation to carbohydrate intake. And the more carbohydrate intake, the more insulin you're going to need. And I've just put my hand up and went, well, why not just reduce the carbohydrates? No brainer to me. And of course, laughed out of the room, absolutely laughed out of the room. So anyway, I continued with that journey and started to deal with clients that were diabetic. And the ones that were doing really well weren't taking my advice, weren't taking the doctor's advice, weren't taking the practitioner nurse's advice. They were doing low carb. And you would, now you're hearing this in hindsight, you'd want to shake me in my late 30s to say, well, come on, this is your wake-up call. But I just didn't, because I was totally brainwashed. I said that word properly, brainwashed. I really believed in the whole grains, and I had bread with bits in, and I absolutely believed it. Still cut oats, everything. I was doing everything I could to stop this weight gain I was getting. Now I was running at least 10 miles a week. So 3 times a week I was out running, and I was not eating any fat, and I was doing all the right things, and I was just getting a little bit tubbier. I had quite a few things that started to worry me. For instance, I couldn't get rid of athlete's foot. I had a huge, terrible mark here, like someone had got a strawberry and smashed against my forehead. And things were getting worse and worse. I'd lost my parents when I was young. My mother was into all the bran and no red meat and all that. So vegans out there, she died of colon cancer. She was doing the stuff that doesn't give you colon cancer, apparently. Well, she got it. I lost a girlfriend to breast cancer. I lost my dad. And they were all following this way of life that was supposed to be really healthy. So anyway, get into my 40s and I start to get lower left quadrant pain. And I'm nearly at the end point, Anthony. I know it's a long story, but it is worth going through. I had lower left quadrant pain, and I thought, genetics, that's it. Colon cancer for my mum, colon cancer for me. I was sitting in that room after the colonoscopy, thinking, this is it. This is it. I'm 40 odd. I've done everything right, and I'm going to die. And that was another big turning point for me, because that pain was excruciating. They said there was nothing there. So I just went on this bigger journey to try and find out what was going on. And it took me to age 50. Then I had a coronary artery calcium scan of 639. And I spoke to the radiologist and the consultant, and they mentioned this chap, Ivor Cummings. And that was pretty good, because I eventually ended up on his podcast, not talking about this story, strange enough. But anyway, so I get to 50 and I discover Eric Berg. And I think, well, there is something to this low carb. All these clients are coming in and doing low carb. Maybe I should try that. And to be honest, that was a game changer. And again, I use the word game changer properly, because this game changer wasn't full of propaganda. This was a game changer that actually started to make people healthier. So I started to do it myself, the low carb diet, following Eric Berg. And I think at that point, Ken Berry wasn't carnivore. He was low carb, going towards keto. And I did that. And my lower left quadrant pain evaporated. My athlete's foot evaporated. This big stress spot that I used to get all the time, that completely went. There's a couple of other kickers as well. I was been deaf since I was 23, wearing hearing aids. I lip read. My hearing is atrocious. And my audiologist was very surprised that instead of every single year where my hearing just got worse and worse, it started to not do a hockey stick, but it started the decreasing ability slowed down. So that was quite interesting. But again, there's a kicker when I get into carnivore. So all these things were getting better. My training was getting better. I recovered better from exercise. Obviously, I've always been in the gym I still train now, still do personal training now, but it's all online. And it was just remarkable. But it didn't clear everything. And obviously, once I was in this space, there's these influencers, that you see. I don't know, Anthony Chaffee, for instance, and Ken Berry and the Steak and Butter Girl, and all these people started talking about keto, and then they started talking about carnivore. So I went keto, which I sort of dipped my toe in for about 2 years. And then at my 55th birthday, I'd now been qualified as a specialist practitioner on obesity and diabetes. I was an advanced personal trainer, and I'd also got qualified in phlebotomy. And I've been reading lots and lots of bloods. And I thought, do you know what? This is perfect, because I can do all my bloods, and then I can go carnivore and see what difference it makes. I'll do a 30-day challenge. A 30-day challenge. So I was 55, and I joined MeetRx to eventually, be an online coach there. That was the idea. So obviously, within 3 months, my testosterone had gone up 30% at age 55 just by going carnivore, and absolutely every single thing that had worried me about my health completely resolved. Absolutely everything. I mean, I don't take any medications. I haven't for over 10 years been to the doctor. I don't get a cough and a cold, all of those things. And so I started to coach people. And it was fascinating, because the people I was seeing in real life were just losing the weight. But the biggest thing for me was it wasn't about body composition. I now realize that's a side effect of being healthy, because even people that weren't losing the weight initially were saying, I feel great. I'm sleeping better. Mental clarity is off the scale. My joint pain is less. My arthritis is better. It just seemed to cure so many things. I know it's not a magic wand, and I know a lot of people, do have really big problems that are not going to be instantly resolved within 6 weeks. But having £100 weight loss is not unusual. When I was high carb, up to age 50, anyone I trained, I would celebrate like £7 coming off, and it would be hard, and they'd always be hungry, and they'd always be thinking about food. Now I get people seriously. I do meal plans, and somebody said, oh, "Thanks for the meal plan. I'm 2 weeks in. I've lost £6. It's the easiest £6 I've ever lost. I'm absolutely stuffed. I really look forward to eating, and I don't think about food." And that's really, really common. So it isn't about weight loss. That does tend to happen. It isn't just about feeling good about yourself or looking good naked or whatever you want to say. It really is the thing that resolves your health. That's it. So that's sort of my journey in a nutshell. I feel the healthiest I've ever felt. 5 years now, carnivore. I'm not going back. I understand, pretty much what's happening in the physiological sense. Oh, by the way, I've got an honours degree in physiology and health sciences, which does definitely help, even though it's mainstream that I learned from. You can read those bits and then extrapolate to what really is going on. So it's been a great journey, a learning journey. As I said to you before, we started. I'm not going to let my education get in the way of learning new things, because we learn all the time. And the more I learn, I don't know about you, but the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And I think that's one of the things that, for those that don't believe or want to troll this channel or put ridiculous comments in there, you need to wake up. You do need to wake up. I believed it all. And I absolutely was supposed to be the poster boy for the food guidelines, and I guarantee it didn't work, and it didn't work for me, and it didn't work for the hundreds of people that I trained. I've now got over 1,000 clients that I've trained with carnivore.
Nice.
And 150 success stories on video. It's actually quite an easy job because it works. And it works. It's that simple. Yeah, you can make some mistakes. You can get your carb cravings back. A trigger event like somebody dying in the family or something. Yeah, it's not easy, but it is simple, and it's tasty, and it's species appropriate. That's the biggest thing I've learned. We're eating the things that we should be eating. So yeah, that's my journey. So it's nice to meet people like yourself who put themselves out there. You have a big following, and you have a lot of nasty comments and some complete idiots trolling you. But it's nice that you just keep going out there. You don't get nasty with it. You just go with the facts, and it's the easiest thing in the world to defend, because it just is common sense. I just go with the common sense. In the end, it's common sense. If you look at the stable isotope testing, humans, any decade, any era, any continent, look at the long bones, the collagen, and you will find from those tests that every single human over the last 350,000 years have eaten at least 80% animal proteins and fats. It's the way we've eaten for those periods of time, and it's just obvious that it works.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah, definitely. Excuse me. And the vast majority of comments I get are extremely positive. They're people that have completely reversed diseases and illnesses and issues that no one else could ever think possible. And then you get, the people say, "Well, all this can be explained just by weight loss from a calorie deficit." And it's like, no, idiot. Like you can't explain, the disappearance of multiple sclerosis, Crohn's, and getting people out of nursing homes with end stage dementia, reversing schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and these sorts of things. I mean, no, you can't actually explain that by a calorie deficit. And quite often people are going and eating more calories, getting more energy dense food. I mean, I see that all the time. I mean, I did that. I was eating very lean meat, not that much of it, and a whole bunch of veggies. As soon as I stopped eating the veggies, ate more meat, more fat, more calories, I lost 23 pounds in less than 2 weeks. So no, that's not what it is. And people are regaining their health long before they lose the weight too. But so there's those people out there that really don't want to look past the surface or even ask questions, or even they just don't care. They're not inquisitive. They just want to explain something away. No, it's probably not because of this. They don't actually look to see if it's true. Don't actually ask somebody. It's like, well, did you eat less or did you eat more? No, I ate more. Okay, that's interesting. They just assume, well, it's calories in, calories out. Can't possibly be. You must have been in a caloric deficit to lose weight. That's the only way you can lose weight. It doesn't matter about your hormones or anything like that. That's what is that? That's just biochemistry. That's not real science. I have a survey, damn it. That's what matters. So, but yeah, the vast majority of people have been very, very positive. And so yeah, you get the occasional idiot, but it doesn't cast a shadow on the amount of people that are healing by this. And I was actually thinking this the other day. I was just like, it actually just seemed, this is like one of those things that just seems too good to be true. And it just seems like this is just some people selling this, Doctor Who's its, magic cure all sort of thing. And I have to think to myself, I was just like, shit, is this really what's going on? It seems too good to be true. Is it too good to be true? And it's just like, no, it just works every time. And every time I apply it to a patient, it has the exact same results. I can predict, I can tell them what's going on with their blood work. I can tell them what's going on with their abdominal MRI scan or their DEXA scan. I can tell them why there's fat deposited in your visceral fat, in your organs, in your muscles. I can tell them why their hormones are out of balance in these ways, why their insulin's up, why their leptin's up, and all these other things are out of balance. And then I say, you do these dietary changes, these will all change, and your life will improve in these ways, and you'll get rid of your Crohn's disease, and Hashimoto's antibodies will come down, and all these sorts of things. And then it happens every time. And so it's even though I'm sort of saying, like, I'm sort of trying, like, pinching myself. Okay, is this I'm actually seeing this, like, what's going on? Because it does seem too good to be true. But it is true. It keeps happening, and so that's the thing. I think that's what keeps us motivated, is it just works, and it is true, and it does make sense, because this is what we've been eating. This is what we're designed to eat. And every organism should eat what they are designed to eat, and nothing else, for optimal health. Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia. It's Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in what you just said there. There's a couple of things I want to pick up on. One is the calorie thing. I don't deal with calories. I just deal with nutrients, and I do talk about hormones. There's an Instagram person out there called Karen Miles, who is a big fan and friend of Kelly Hogan, and I think we've spoken, not Kelly Hogan and I, but Karen and I, about under eating being a big problem in the community. And she put on 19 pounds over the last couple of years, even though she's carnivore. And she said, well, I'm going to track calories just to see. And she proved pretty much that by increasing her calorie, I'm not using calories in the way that I'm saying I believe in them, but she did track them, and she increased the calories, and her weight just dropped off. Fact. Nice. There it was. It was in a spreadsheet. She's just a nice person, nothing to sell, no coaching, nothing like that. She just every single day in a spreadsheet said, this is what I'm eating, this is how much I've increased my food, and this is the weight coming off. It's just a fact. And I think one of the things, when I did my diabetes training, I had this guidance medical physiology textbook, and I actually hijacked it for my personal training clients, because if they came to me and said they're not going to sort their nutrition out, they still want to lose weight, but they're not worried about their nutrition, they don't believe in carnivore or low carb, I would say, look, I'll read you the paragraphs, but these paragraphs will put me out of business, right? Because it basically says you will increase your metabolic use of fat by reducing your insulin. And, this is a proper medical physiology textbook. And throughout it, it just constantly tells you, if you keep your insulin low, you're going to burn your fat. And if your insulin's high, you're not. And of course, this crosses over into diabetes, because why do I tell diabetics to inject in different sites? Because if they inject insulin into a site, they will gain fat.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. But the other thing is, and this will tie in now to your calories, if I have a type 1, I say to them, look, before 1922, you could have eaten 10,000 calories and you would still have died. You would have just wasted away because you have no insulin, which absolutely proves that calories are rubbish as a
Mm-hmm.
metric. Because there's a person that's eating, seriously, 10,000 calories a day and wasting away because they don't have hormones that are adequate. They don't have insulin to be able to store that energy. Simple as that. As soon as insulin was discovered, they didn't know there was type 1, type 2, so they were still a bit mystified by it. Worked for some people, not others. And that pretty much proves that hormones are driving fat storage. Not just fat storage, though, but muscle growth, bone density. It's not a hormone to be scared of, by the way. I mean, it is a hormone we need, and bodybuilders, they want insulin to grow muscle and stuff like that. So I think there's too many pockets of common sense that proves that hormones play a big role. Because you've got the type 1 diabetics proving that calories don't matter because the hormone's not there. They're not gaining any muscle mass. They're losing weight on 10,000 calories. But it's one of those things that I've been interested in. I put lots of experiments online talking about, for instance, you can do an experiment. A calorie, the actual use of calorie, is how much energy is given out to raise 1 liter of water by 1 degree centigrade, which is really quite handy to know. It's about combustion. So I don't think there's a naked flame in my body that's burning any of my food. So that's the first thing. Secondly, so if you take a liter of water, the reason they use a liter of water is because it weighs a kilogram. Now, if you've got that in a kettle and it's at room temperature and you boil it up, you actually put in 80 calories of energy into that water. That water will stay the same weight.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what happens. Now, it's a kettle, and people go, oh, yeah, but you've got steam. And you've just tricked yourself, the people that believe in calories, because that's the human body. We're not a closed system. So there's the thermodynamic rules that you keep quoting are for closed systems. So a bomb calorimeter, if you make your kettle a bomb calorimeter, don't allow anything to leave it, it will still weigh the same, even though you put 80 calories in. Now you leave it on the countertop, you walk away, it loses 80 calories and it still weighs the same because calories are a metric that measures heat. That's it. It's nothing to do with nutrition, nothing to do with it whatsoever. That doesn't happen in our body. There's no naked flame. There's no combustion. That's not how it works. It's all biochemistry. It's so obvious as well because, like you say, I've eaten more calories than I need. I did a live experiment a couple of years ago where I just did 3 meals a day, lots of snacks, all carnivore, and I deliberately gained weight before the experiment started, and I'd gained about 25 pounds deliberately for this experiment. First week of overeating, but just carnivore food, I lost 4 pounds. Then the following week, I lost another 4 pounds. And I was saying, look, I'm eating 4,000 calories, 3,500 calories a day, 4,000 calories a day. I'm losing weight. I'm losing the weight I gained from eating stuff that allegedly is healthy. So I've now gone carnivore and it's taken that weight off. So I think there's no sense in the calorie argument, none whatsoever.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and you think about it as well. I mean, a lot of these things don't even get used for energy in the first place, whether or not they would be burned. I mean, we're not combustion engines, as you say. We're chemical factories. These chemicals get used chemically, and they're often used to make other molecules and other structural components of our body. Every single molecule that our DNA codes for is a protein, and it's a string of amino acids. Add different carbohydrates and fats onto those things, maybe, but the backbone structure is a chain of amino acids. That's what the DNA codes for, are strings or amino acids. That's it. And then you can add things to those later, but the DNA code is for proteins, for amino acids. So the proteins that you eat, those aren't being used for energy.
Absolutely.
They're being used
Structure.
to make your body. Your body
Mm.
is made out of protein and fats, and you can make carbohydrates as well when you need some of those. So they're not even used for energy. So it's like, well, what does it matter how much heat energy
Exactly.
escapes from protein if you're not even using it as energy and you're not burning it and and I mean, it's just like it's so backwards to think about this. And yet people who purport to have taken biology and taken biochemistry, they don't even get it. They don't actually get that, which is wild to me. And just simply ignoring the hormone side of things makes no sense. Like you said, a type 1 diabetic can't store muscle and fat, cannot. They'll waste away until they die. It doesn't matter how much they eat, and unless they get insulin. And then people with an insulinoma secreting out massive amounts of insulin from a tumor, they get enormously obese. It doesn't matter what they eat. Everything they eat just gets stored straight into fat, and they get horribly tired. They have almost no energy. They're feeling awful. And so they're forced to eat just to sort of maintain their energy levels. But they really don't maintain their energy levels, and it doesn't matter what they eat. They just get enormously obese. And so the idea that your hormones just don't matter doesn't make any sense. And if you're eating carbohydrates, that's going to raise your insulin, and people forget that. You have people going around saying, well, you eat carbohydrates and insulin goes up, and then puts energy in the cells. That's just a normal thing. No, it's not. I mean, it can do that. That's actually not the normal physiology. The vast majority of animal life on Earth don't do that. The vast majority of animal life on Earth don't take in exogenous carbohydrates. They take in protein and fat. And so they make their own carbohydrates. And when you add in carbohydrates, like to a cow or to a sheep, they start storing fat. I mean, we do this in order to make cows fat. People say, well, the gladiators, they ate a lot of grains, and I've saw the movie Gladiator, they were all ripped. Like, yeah, right. Well, that's not what the gladiators back then looked like. In fact, they were called the grain eaters, and that's because they ate a lot of grains in order to gain fat, because that was more body armor. That gave them area of padding away from their major organs and major vessels. Like I learned that 20 years ago in college. I mean, and then that's not the nice thing about having a classical education and a diverse education is that you can pick up these things. If someone tries to pull some garbage like that, you're like, hold on a second, no, that's bullshit. And it was taught that way. It was taught that way to us, that the Roman gladiators were called the grain eaters, and they did that specifically to put on fat so they could be more protected. That's how it was taught in my history class. And so it's just sort of silly when people say that. And then I saw someone talking about how it can store carbohydrates, and they're like, it also stores protein, by the way. Like they had the secret, and no one knew, but they were just so enlightened and so educated on the hormones and physiology. The problem is that it actually affects over 100 different processes in your body. And when you start raising it up because you're eating too much carbohydrates, all of those systems get out of balance, and you can get very sick, and you can have a lot of things go wrong. So you can't ignore the hormones. You can ignore any description of calories, though. Energy levels and the amount that you're taking in, certainly that has an effect on your body, but they're not calories. Like that's not the way of describing it. I did want to know, though, when you said you gained weight, you intentionally gained over 20 pounds. Was that by adding in carbs, or how did you do that?
Yeah, adding in carbs.
There you go.
Simple as
So,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, when you go to diabetes, for instance, and again, this is another moment that made me ridiculed, but to me, it still seems sense. I like to have a frame of reference. So when they talk about sort of the concentration of sugar in your bloodstream, I'm like, well, what is that? And they say, oh, it's easy. It's a teaspoon of sugar in 5 liters of blood, approximately speaking. Right. Okay. So why would you drink a can of Coke which has 9 teaspoons of sugar? If you're telling me you need a teaspoon, why would you deliberately put 9 teaspoons in just by drinking a can of Coke? And it was like, well, exactly what you just said. Well, the insulin's there, it'll do it. Oh, right. Okay. So then why would you have a pizza and maybe do 15 teaspoons? That seems like ridiculous. And there's no common sense answer. It is, as soon as you look at it like that, it is ridiculous. Why are you putting something into your body in huge amounts that's toxic, that your body has to continually detox and get it back to the level? It's just, it makes no sense. And I think that's that's the thing. The people that love carbs just don't want to listen to sense because they love carbs. And part of it is that when I was 20, I looked great. I did a bodybuilding show. So I think a lot of it is also the people that seem to love carbs are still relatively young, or they've not had any problems. So they think, well, yeah, it works for me. Well, it works for you for a while, but that old adage about you can't out train or outrun a bad diet is absolutely true. It will catch up on you. It will definitely do that. Your body does not have an infinite supply of beta and alpha cells in its pancreas. You have limited capacity. Your receptors, you don't want to stress the receptors too much. I mean, Dr. Jason Fung has a nice analogy about the Japanese tube trains where they have porters who push the passengers in to this already crammed train. Well, that's insulin pushing in or trying to push in more energy than it really requires. It's absolutely ridiculous. So what does the body do? Well, the scapegoat is two things: your red blood cells, so it sticks the sugar to the red blood cells, and the other thing is it stores it in the fat rather than in your bloodstream. So that's it. That's the mechanism. Once your body gives up, once it can't keep up, once your insulin sensitivity, I don't like the word insulin resistance because I don't think it is a resistant thing. The cell is resistant to the incoming energy because it doesn't need it. But I think it's more about sensitivity and the fact that you're just overloading the system. And that makes sense to me. So the people in that train in Japan are just going, no, we don't want anyone. We know we're in here. There's no more room for a person, right? Well, that's not porter resistance. That's coming from within the train. So I think that to me again is common sense. All this stuff about carbs being okay, and I mean, there was some guy saying, I've got 400 grams of carbs coming in every day. I'm great. I'm doing well. I'm bodybuilding. It's working well for me. And I just messaged and said, yeah, okay, come back in 20 years and tell me how it's going. That's it. Because I was that person. All right. So I understand why they don't listen, because if you're feeling great and you're looking good, you got your abs, doing bodybuilding shows, playing well at tennis and winning tournaments, you do think you're doing great. I do now look back and think I could have been even greater. That's the other thing. You don't know your full potential. And this is, just coming back to some real basics about carnivore, for instance. I know you're a big proponent of sort of being as clean as possible and being as strict as possible. And I've done that. I've gone 100% carnivore and I've been 95% carnivore. And the difference isn't 5%. If you are really on this for a long period of time, I'm not saying like a couple of weeks, but I was really strict for about 3 months and I felt amazing. I felt absolutely amazing. And people don't get that. My big pressure is, social situations with the family. Everyone wants to eat a certain way. And, we've got elderly people in the family. It might be the last Christmas. So don't sit there and just have meat and all this. And I think that helps with my coaching, that I am in those pressurized situations where you don't want to be that person that's spoiling it for everyone. I do flip it around and say, is it really that important that I eat a potato? Really? I mean, can you just not be bothered about it? But some people really are bothered about what you're eating, or Auntie Jane has made this cake from fresh. You can't say no to that. She's done it specially. So I think that's the thing. So I'm sort of like 95% most of the time, I think. And a lot of times when I want to be really sharp, I just go to 100%. But I wouldn't touch carbs. And I proved that with the carb experiment. I gained 25 pounds in 6 weeks really easily. And I wasn't pigging out. And these weren't even cut. I deliberately picked carbs that weren't, it wasn't pizza. It wasn't chips or crisps or anything like that. It was yogurt, for instance, like a fruity yogurt, bit of fruit every so often, dark chocolate, which is really pushed as being great for you. I went to caffeinated coffee, that, things like that, which are pushed as not that bad. Oh boy, inflammatory, joint pains and body fat. It was incredible. And I documented everything. I wasn't hacking it. I wasn't like, midnight having a pizza. I did what I said I was doing because I actually wanted to know. I wanted to prove it to myself that the things that I used to think were healthy and not too bad actually are, and they were. And, there are people out there, oh, yeah, I'm all right with yogurt. Yeah, okay, maybe you are all right with yogurt. You're not thriving with yogurt. I'm not anti-yogurt, by the way. I'm just saying there are certain things that if someone is struggling with body composition, the first thing I say is, are you having dairy? And dairy is one of those things that weirdly has more saturated fat than any other types of fat. All foods have a mixture of fats, so dairy falls into that weird category where actually there's more saturated fat than other types of fat. So if you look at ribeye, and people come to me and they say, oh, I'm really worried about this diet, all that saturated fat, I'll show them a picture of ribeye and say, right, oh, how much of that do you think is saturated fat? We'll get into why they think that in the first place, but I like to make it real. So look, that's 100 grams of ribeye there. Oh, look at that. It's all fatty. Oh, I don't know, 20%. And I'm like, no, it's 2 grams. That is saturated fat out of 100. And you're really worried about that, are you? This fresh food from this grass-fed cow, you're worried about that. Okay. What did you eat last week? Oh, well, I had some Pop-Tarts. I had some cereals. And it's like, okay, so all this stuff in a box with this big, long list of ingredients, you're worried about this bit of steak. And I think that's the thing about this way of eating. It can get very sciencey, but in the end, it's down to common sense. And this is what I do with the meal plans now. I get people to tell me what they were eating. And I use it not against them, but I say, look, I can remember when you signed up and you told me what you were eating, and tell me how many of these are actually healthy. And invariably, most people are eating crap, sadly. Anyway, I think that's it's interesting about the bloods. You were saying about the bloods as well, because with the phlebotomy side, I get a lot of people sending me bloods. I'm open to interpreting, their results. And what I was finding, and I found this really early on, even in keto, was that the normative ranges that doctors want to see, and I work in combination with doctors who had comments, and I talked to the labs. Even this week I was talking to a lab about how they do their omega-3 testing in relation to saturated fat and how misleading it is what they're saying. So I would get the most common ones. We'll stick on diabetes for a second. Is people would contact me and they'd say, hey, I don't understand what's happening. My CGM is saying my daily blood glucose is fantastic. It's absolutely great. And I'm doing a finger prick every so often to test that just the CGM is all right. And it seems everything is fine. I've just had a set of labs and my fasted insulin is fantastic. My C-peptide, which is a proxy marker for insulin production, that's really great. But my HbA1c has gone up. And I'm like, this is really common. You don't need to worry about this. But of course, this has a red flag and they're called in because they're I was pre-diabetic, allegedly. And I have to explain to them that it's a calculation. It's not a direct measurement. It's just looking at an assumption of the life of the red blood cells. And, I bored you with this before we started. But when I started with phlebotomy, there were some things that we had to talk about. And hemolytic anemics, their red blood cells, they don't last as long as they should. And one thing you get from that is a fantastic HbA1c, because they're not in the bloodstream long enough. They don't get glycated, and you're told to ignore the HbA1c and do the other tests like a finger prick, fasted glucose, C-peptide, all that sort of stuff. So it's not a bit of a leap for me to go, well, if they can die too soon for this calculation, they can also live too long and give you an artificially high. And that's exactly what is happening. So bloods, to me, you mentioned it, it's like, if you know what you're looking at, that's really great. But if you don't, you get a lot of these false flags. So if your HbA1c has gone up, I'm going to plug my book now. My book here is The Guide to Blood Tests in this context, because it is important. I mean, I've got some case studies in there. There was another reading is the blood urea nitrogen. Now, that is basically impacted by protein metabolism. It is impacted on the fact that those waste products are going to be higher. Now, if you look at influencers online, doctors, for instance, talking about the blood urea nitrogen going up, they very rarely talk about the fact that it could be down to protein. Let me just shut this door. Don't know what that noise is. Anyway, if you eat more protein, you're going to have more waste from protein, which is what the blood urea and nitrogen is, nitrogen waste product of protein. So it's going to go up. Now, nursing websites know this. So if they're teaching people about phlebotomy, a nurse will always say, if you have a high BUN, Well, I just ask the person, the patient, are they eating more protein? It's normally just that. No big deal. But of course, there's also a calculation based on that, which is the glomerulus filtration rate, Latin for ball of yarn, because the kidney's full of these little balls of yarn. Anyway, so it works out the filtration rate of the kidney based on these two other readings and creatinine, which is a waste product of protein metabolism. So if you eat more protein, it knocks out the GFR and it looks like your filtration rate of your kidney is low. Now, that isn't the truth, because you've got this false premise at the beginning of the normative ranges are based on people eating 60% carbohydrates and generally are quite sick. So the GFR can flag up quite bad results. And one of the case studies which I flashed up at the talk we did recently in the War on Health was this person saying, "You've saved my life." They were having me up for dialysis or transplants. And you were really cool and just said, get a cystatin C test, which is a much better marker of kidney filtration rate. And it was fine, absolutely fine. Now that's happened, that's repeatable. And I could have literally filled that book with people worried about the HbA1c and the blood urea nitrogen, which leads obviously to the GFR problem. So I think when you talk about bloods, if anyone is getting bloods, make sure you get it interpreted by someone that understands carnivore or keto, or the fact that the normative ranges are the best guess from many sick people eating 60% carbohydrates. It's not about being optimal. So, sorry, I've jumped on a little bit of a rant there, but it is something I encounter all the time. And you've got to be able to say, look at the whole person, and the environment of a person. What makes a person thrive is, the way they eat, and obviously things like light and darkness and getting out and about and activity and all that sort of stuff. But the normative ranges don't do that. They have no nuance whatsoever. They just paint everyone the same. Those ranges are not optimal. I can't stress that enough. And I'm using your platform because it does bother me, because there are influencers out there that apparently know about carb addiction and all this sort of stuff that reckon the bit about the HbA1c is BS. But it isn't. I mean, it's fact. You can actually count, you can do a reticulocyte count test, which tests whether your red blood cells are being overproduced or underproduced, which if they're underproduced in a way that you want, because they're living longer, which is fine because of all the other markers, you can test it. So an anemic person, you can use the reticulocyte count to say, yep, it is your red blood cells. We need to do something about your bone marrow, and we need to do something about the production of red blood cells, try and help you with this. So, big deal for me. Sorry about that, but it's just, it happens all the time. And I get people every week a bit worried about what their doctor said. And you just think, well, actually, these bloods are great. I mean, the other thing is like the triglyceride level is really, much more important than LDL, for instance. And it's constant that we're talking about this. I mean, the 1977 food guidelines in the US, and we followed in 83. I mean, all of that is based on rubbish, a rubbish premise, isn't it? I mean, there's no randomized controlled trials on red meat at all, incidentally. I mean, those food guidelines didn't even have a category for red meat. It was just animal protein, and those changes was based on a cohort of less than 2,500 men. There wasn't even women in it. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with these ridiculous studies. I think you said 5. I thought there were 6, but anyway, there's 6 or 5.
Around there. Not many.
Of those, sorry?
Not many, anyway.
Not many. Well, it's not enough. So you've got 2,500 or less actually people, and 2 of those studies actually had cautionary tales at the end. One said something like concerned about the potential toxicity of the intervention, which was removing saturated fat and replacing it with vegetable oil. So you had a really big caution in that one. And the other one was there's no place for low-fat diets in the treatment of heart attacks. Said that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so when we talk about LDL, I also get into, you do realize that it's based on that, and also the Sugar Research Foundation's fraud, before that, which I think you've covered on your channel many times. We don't need to go over it, but you know, when you've got people being worried about their health because there's influencers out there still saying stuff that's based on this fraud from the 1950s and the 70s, completely provable, you know, the documents in academia about this fraud.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's the thing. It is demonstrably the case. This is not, just us slinging arrows. It's a matter of record. It's published
Yeah.
in the top medical journals in the world, like the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA. They published the Sugar Research Foundation's own memos talking about how they were doing this in back in the 60 years ago, 70 years ago. And that was published in the JAMA in 2016. So it's like, that's and for the amount that our society as a planet has bought into this whole ideology, you would think that there would just be concrete evidence that this was the case. But no, we're still arguing over this. 50 years after, nearly 50 years after the McGovern report and the USDA declared unequivocally that this was bad for our health, and this is still coming up, and it was hotly debated before that in the literature and outside of it. And so, if the case was closed, you'd think there'd just be this huge body of experimental data and evidence showing this, but there's only that handful, and they all show the opposite. None of them support the cholesterol model of heart disease. None of them, not a single randomized controlled trial in existence, supports the cholesterol heart hypothesis. And most of them go actually directly counter. The largest one in 9,600 patients, who's like the Minnesota Coronary Heart Study, done by our good friend Ansel Keys, almost certainly paid for by the sugar companies. And they had 9,600 patients. They were institutionalized so that they couldn't go anywhere. They could perfectly control every meal that they had. And they replaced saturated fat with margarine and vegetable oils. And what happened? They followed them for years. They perfectly controlled their diet. They replaced saturated fat with margarine. They lowered their LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol. And as a result, killed a lot of people with heart attacks and strokes. And so, and so where was that? Why wasn't that taught in medical school? Why were we taught the Framingham study, which is a correlational study, and it's a prospective cohort study, and that cannot show causation, and in fact showed no correlation whatsoever between cholesterol and heart disease. And in fact, lower cholesterol was correlated with higher cardiovascular mortality rates. But where was this randomized controlled trial? Well, that was done in the 70s. Why wasn't that out? Well, that's because that was done by Ansel Keys, and he didn't want that, showed the wrong thing, and so they buried it for 40 years, and it had to be uncovered by Ramsden over the NIH. At 40 years later, and we're still arguing about this. Like you said, this was a fraud. And now they're saying, well, first it was cholesterol. And then it was like, well, there's all these different kinds of cholesterol. And they're like, oh, okay, well, it's LDL. That's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. And, oh, well, there's 100 different kinds of LDL. Oh, all right, well, it's oxidized SDLDL. And okay, well, what oxidizes it? It's sugar, it's carbohydrates, it's seed oils, it's alcohol. Well, it's, and then they do ApoB, and, it's just like, they're just shifting the goalposts. It was never cholesterol. It's never going to be cholesterol. So, well, but what if it gets too high? What if it gets really high? Is there a too high? Probably. Your body's not going to do it, though. Just like your body's not going to physiologically put you into an alkaline state or an acidotic state, overly acidotic state, or over alkalinic state, because you'll die. Your body is going to control that. And so if your body's left up to its own devices, like you just fast, you don't eat for 5 days, what happens? Your HDL goes up, your LDL goes up, triglycerides go down. Total cholesterol goes up. So, that's what your body's trying to do at homeostasis. That's at rest. You're not adding any inputs there. That's what it's trying to do. And so, yeah, maybe it can go 5 times higher than that. Maybe it'll do something, but you know what it won't do? Cause heart disease, because it does not. It doesn't matter what level your cholesterol is. It is not a cause of heart disease, even if cholesterol is utilized or used by some inflammatory process or some pathological process going on in your body, it's not the high levels of cholesterol that is driving that reaction. It's something else that's damaging it, damaging your body, damaging the lining of your arteries, and driving that reaction. But it does not come from even elevated past where I would say they're good at. It's never going to cause heart disease. It'll probably do something else, but it's not going to do that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's just a long list of ridiculous assumptions. I mean, it all starts, doesn't it, in the 1900s, and you had these Russians doing autopsies on people and going, "Oh, there's somebody that's died, and look, there's some fatty deposits. It must be that." And everyone uses the analogy of firefighters at the fire. You know, it's probably there to cause some sort of reparative thing. And I think, I mean, that's gone on, and I think they just wouldn't give up on it. So they fed rabbits, those well-known meat eaters, cholesterol to see what happens. So you're giving the rabbit the wrong food. It still didn't prove it, even with rabbits. So the problem with Ansel Keys is he did one really good study, which is the Minnesota starvation experiment. He was the man, wasn't he? And he did well with that particular one. And that he had to be at the forefront, I think. I think his ego is well documented. So then he's got the same MO. So he does a six country study. Many people think this is interchangeable because he later does a 7-country study, but he did the one to prove cholesterol, heart disease. He only included the 6 countries out of the 14 he looked at. And then later on, he did the 7-country study, which had 22 countries. So here's a cherry picking guy that is the base of all these influencers lately. And, the 20 volumes of his studies, if you read them, you find out the saturated fat was coming from cake and ice cream. So it's just not red meat at all. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And I think there was a good thing Dr. Malcolm Kendrick did with Zoe Harcum, and they actually got the WHO data for 192 countries, and they looked at all-cause mortality and cholesterol levels and heart disease deaths, and it absolutely showed an inverse association. So basically, from 192 countries, WHO documentation. I can't share the graph because I think it's copyright, but the higher the cholesterol, the less is the death rate. And what Zoe Harcum and I think Malcolm Kendrick have said is when they've shown doctors the chart, they've gone, "Oh wow, it's worse than we thought." They can't even read the chart. It's really worrying. So I think, that is my pet hate at the moment. And also, with the bloods, there's nuance to that because, like you say, they're trying to find other culprits. So you get into I like what you said about the oxidized LDL. Well, what causes that? Yeah, you're right. It's sugar. It's carbohydrates. It's causing that. But they forget that. They just, it's really bad because it's LDL, so it must be fat based, which is ridiculous in the first place. But anyway, so they use that. And I had a gentleman come to me and he said, "Oh, I'm at a high risk of a heart attack because my PLAC2 test or plaque test is called, which is quite clever. It's called plaque, apparently that's a marker of high risk for heart disease. Now the problem is that's going to the false premise as well, because you have that high when your LDL is high, therefore it must be a problem. Now if you know a little bit about what the plaque test looks at, it's an enzyme that degrades oxidized LDL. And I just said to the gentleman, actually that's really good because your body is trying to fight the oxidized LDL. 30 years of vegan, by the way, just thought I'd throw that in. And 3 months later, it had done its job because the oxidized LDL had plummeted. It was back in the green and it was totally fine. So I think that's the thing. They're fighting tooth and nail to hang on to this. It takes a big man to go, "Do you know what? I've got 20 years of material out there and I'm actually wrong." Right. And I think that's the biggest problem we're facing. And as somebody said, the rules won't change until everyone that did the rules has died. And I think that's the problem. We've got too many people on a save face. Whereas I'd have more respect for someone saying, "Yeah, I just realized I was completely wrong about LDL. And I just bought into all the rubbish," because there is too much evidence out there that it isn't that. And we're looking at the wrong things, or mainstream medicine is looking at the wrong things. So That's my take on that.
Yeah. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. No, I totally agree. And that's great about the plaque test as well. I love that about the reticulocytes also. And I might get you to, just to go back over that again, just for people that hear that, because that is something that comes up sometimes. I explain, this sort of the same thing to you, but it's very good because I actually didn't even think about it from a reticulocyte count, but that makes perfect sense. And this is something that people can go home and test, and they say, oh, okay, well, look, this is something we can do. So, but yeah, just a comment about Ansel Keys. We did that really good, Minnesota starvation study, where first of all proved calories in, calories out, not a thing, because he starved these people. They're eating basically nothing and they were losing weight, and then it plateaued off because their metabolism shut down. And some of these people were eating so little calories that if it were just calories in, calories out, they would have lost more weight than they started with. So they would have just popped out of existence. And and so that's the thing, you had to have done something good to get some authority to then sell to the highest bidder, like the unscrupulous bastard he was. And and I think that he probably was in his element with the starvation study, being some sort of evil sociopath that just hated people and just was probably very happy to starve them to death and cause all sorts of harm to them. And then he decided to sell his favor out to the highest bidder to then go and become one of the greatest mass murderers of all time. I mean, he's responsible for probably billions of people at this point getting heart disease and many hundreds of millions of people dying early of heart attacks. I mean, that's him. And if it wasn't him, it'd been someone else. And that argument did not work very well during the Nuremberg trials. So I don't think it's going to really work for him. I've said this before, but the only reason I'm a bit upset that he and his Confederates who sold out the health of the world are now dead is that we can't put them on trial and execute them for their crimes against humanity, because it's truly sick what they did to people, and we really need to undo their entire legacy and throw their entire life's work in the trash. Because people say, like, well, they've done some good work. We don't know. We don't know what was corrupt, when the corruption started, what was compromised. And I just think you just throw all of that out and just put them in the dustbin as a human being and just have them die in obscurity. But that's just my little rant about someone I hate. So, which is probably not good for you to do that. But so can you explain a bit? So if someone has been on carnivore for a while and they've been very good about it, and then their blood sugars are actually pretty normal, and their HbA1c is just a little upper normal, and so that calculated blood sugar level is higher than they would think that should be. What can they do looking at their blood work to see if this is normal or if this is actually oxidized or glycated hemoglobin?
Yeah. Well, first thing, look at the common sense. If they've got a continual glucose monitor, that is what it says on the tin. It's continually monitoring your glucose. All right. I know it's not exactly from the bloodstream, but we know it's calibrated and it's pretty good. And many people that also do the finger prick test and can sort of collaborate with the evidence. They can say, right, this is coming from my blood. This is right. So that's the first thing. And that gives you an average. And this is the first flag. So they're like, well, my daily blood glucose reading is great. Why is the HbA1c high? So that's the first thing. Believe your blood. Believe the things you've been doing every single day, 24/7, being constantly monitored. Prick your fingers every single day if you're worried about it, and you'll see the average. You can work the average out yourself. And you say, all right, actually, I'm managing my blood glucose really well. 3 times throughout the day after food, whenever you want to do it. Just get a good handle on it for your own sake, right? But if you want to have the data, well, you can go and get a blood test, and you can get your fasted insulin, your fasted blood glucose, and a thing called C-peptide measured. Now, this is the next stage. And C-peptide is a great proxy marker for how much insulin you're producing, because when the vesicle bursts open and off goes insulin, cleaves off the C-peptide, and the half-life of insulin is much quicker than it is for C-peptide. So you get this really good reading. So you could say, oh, actually, my blood glucose is good. I'm not producing lots of insulin. I still really want to know, why is this wrong? So then you could look at, well, how are they calculating the HbA1c? What are they doing? Well, the big key is they are assuming the life of the red blood cell. Literally, your hemoglobin is having bits stuck to it. I mean, that's very basic. And they're just looking at that. Now, if your red blood cells are floating around for longer because the spleen is not looking at them and thinking, wow, these are terrible red blood cells, we can keep them for a bit longer. Your body's really smart. It's making 1 million red blood cells a second, right? So it doesn't want to go through all that energy and recycling the proteins if it can help it, because the body's smart. So your red blood cells are lasting longer. And like I say, I can't get into this enough, because if people argue, well, this is BS, well, so hang on a minute. If I came in and I was anemic, I was hemolytic anemic, what would you do? Oh, well, for that, you would have a very great HbA1c, because your red blood cells, they're dying so quickly, there's not a chance to be glycated. And so we'd do a reticulocyte count, and we'd actually prove to you that there's a huge turnover of red blood cells. You're making too many. They can't be living. They must be being killed off in the spleen, because you wouldn't be producing so much, right? There would be other signs if they were sticking around for too long and you had too much blood. That wouldn't happen. So I'll have a reticulocyte count test then, please, because I want to prove that my red blood cells are living longer. And that's what happens. That is what happens every time. What you said, how predictable it is, I never panic. As long as those other markers are okay, which they always are. Is your daily blood glucose good? Yes. Is your fasted insulin good when you have the panel? Yes. Right. Okay. Go and get that reticulocyte count. You will get pushback. You will get pushback, but if you ask for it, you will get it eventually. You might have to pay for it. In the UK, it's very difficult to get, but people have got it. In the States, it seems to be a bit easier. It's cheaper to get a private test as well, where you don't need a referral from a healthcare professional. But that's it. I mean, it really is that simple.
Yeah.
And then you categorically have that. I don't need to worry about that anymore, because the way we're eating is so good for the body. My red blood cells are great. There are other nuances you can look at, like there's an RDW, the sort of red blood cell width, and you can look at other things if you're worried about what's happening. But normally, I've yet to find anybody that's had the red blood cells living longer and any other problems.
Yeah.
So, you can do the complete blood count if you want. But I don't feel it's needed.
Yeah.
No, that's it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's, well, I mean, it's the reassurance factor, I mean, there are a lot of blood tests that it's just like, yeah, you probably don't, well, what about this? What should I do that? I'm like, well, it's not necessary. It's not really going to change anything that we do. But it's just sort of, if you want to see and you want to check, and it's like, I'd feel better if we checked it. Fine. Check it. It's your dime.
Yes.
And some of these things, they would be paying for themselves anyway. And so if they want to pay for it, I don't care, if they're interested in it, tell them.
I do have a video explaining it all on my channel as well.
Yeah.
Which literally says, should I worry? My HbA1c's gone up. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Perfect.
But yeah, all of that stuff's in the book. All of what I just said, it's all in there.
Yeah. So what other sorts of things are in in your book? What sort of other tests and everything like that do you go through that people can look for, or what are the things that the book addresses, and so who would it be good for?
Right. Well, firstly, it puts it in context because a blood test is a snapshot.
Mm.
You know, you woke up this morning, Anthony, you probably felt different to now, and your body will react. And if we did your blood panel now and we did it tomorrow, it could be different. So the first thing is it is a snapshot. So you need really to see trends. So I'm not overly happy with one blood test. If someone comes and says, I've been doing this every 3 months for the last 9 months, great, we can see a trend. Because even dehydration can throw some of the numbers out. But if you've only got one blood test, it's still a good starting point, but it's not the be all and end all, because I can't work out what happened before and predict what's going to happen afterwards. We've just one. Same with two. We still don't really have that trend line, you know. So it talks about that, talks about the context, what blood actually is, why it's important, and all that sort of stuff. And then it just gives you the basic sort of what you want as a carnivore, keto, or low carber, what tests you really want. And it then says, right, if you're worried about your liver, these are the things you need. Because very often bloods come to me and I'm like, you're worried about your liver, but they haven't done GGT, for instance. It's really crucial to understand, to do a differential diagnosis. Your doctor needs that to be able to look at the other 3 enzymes that they normally look at. So we talk about that. You know, if you're thinking about a specific thing like liver or kidney health, or you're looking at glucose, if you're looking at LDL, these are on thyroid, of course, that's a big one. So it just talks about those in general, and then the sort of pitfalls for each type of panel in the context of the way we're eating. So it explains the normative ranges and their limitations, basically, the limitations of normative ranges. Then it gets into common misconceptions or misinterpretation of results that are flagged, and therefore you're freaking out. And why would that happen? And then it gives you the equipment and the knowledge to be able to say, if you do this test, this will actually be the killer test that we need to do. So for instance, with the GFR, you do this. I'm giving away all my detail. I don't mind. Actually, by the way, I'm cool with all this. If your GFR is low and you're eating a lot of protein, get the cystatin C test. That will probably put your mind at rest, which happens time and time again. I'm not saying people don't have kidney problems or any of these things. The idea is to know a bit more in the context of the way we're eating. So that's it, really. I mean, that's it. Each panel has a killer test that's often missed. So thyroid, the classic would be not doing reverse T3, not doing both antibodies. That would be classic. Or just the TSH, which isn't even the thyroid hormone, tells you nothing, really. Just tells you what the thyroid's been told to do. It doesn't then tell you what it did. So it's plain English. That's the idea. It's not a thick tome. It's referenced. There's a bit of fun in there, sort of all the myths about blood, whether it's blue or red or whatever. And, it talks about that at the beginning. It's a bit light. It then gives you reference ranges, American and sort of European ranges. But there's also that disclaimer that it does depend on the labs. This is a big problem I'm facing because I'm worldwide. Some labs have slightly different reference ranges, but that also shows what a mockery it is, because they've got different ranges. So how are they doing that? Are they basing it on a database of the people they've seen in their area? And then you get into, I don't get too woo-woo, but, where you live and where your genetics, especially from your mother's side, your environment makes a big difference to how we interpret the results. This is already known and actually publicly put on the tests. If it's kidney, for instance, if you're, European or if you're of African descent, it's different. You have to look at it, even though it's the same blood, the same lab, and you're living in the same country, it can be different. And I think that's one of the big things that, we talk about diet a lot, but I do believe there's, a lot more we could be thinking about, like environment. And, you're big with the plants and the fruits and stuff like that. So am I. We're not designed to eat that, but we're also not designed to live in another environment and just take over the way those people are living. So I couldn't live in Central Africa easily like that, and I think that's another thing. We have to get the context of, well, where were you living? What's in the environment? Has that changed your bloods temporarily? just to make this really basic for people, this is what I say in a consultation. If you go to the garden centre to buy a plant, it will have a list. Doesn't like shade. You've got to water it minimally. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. It likes the sun. It likes lots of water. You have to feed it every 3 months. Well, that's because that plant is from an environment which you have just artificially taken it from and put it somewhere else. Well, that's the same as humans. If you're in Central Africa, that's the L0 type, which is latitude 0, your bloods are going to be different because your mitochondria are absolutely geared up to movement, not heat. So we get into decoupling the mitochondria and all this sort of stuff. So if you've come from that area and you're now living in Britain, rain, cold, your mitochondria are not programmed for heat, which they will be. I mean, that's the thing. We're adaptive as a species. So somebody coming to this way of eating, it's exactly the same. If they've been eating giving their body this environment, and also maybe a bad environment generally, not getting out, not doing activity, not seeing sunlight, all those sort of things. You look at the bloods in the full context of the person. If someone comes to me and says, my 9 to 5 job is sitting in front of a computer, then I go home and I sit and watch the television and I'm on the couch, my bloods, I want you to interpret. Okay, well, I'm actually going to include those other things, which not many people do, because we can look at so many different tests to work out what's going on. CRP is a really good one. And people say, I've got real pains in my knees. What's causing that? You'll love this. Right. So we do an HS-CRP and it's 0.5. Right. There's no inflammation in your body from your CRP. But I reckon that something you're eating is doing that. And because it's something you're eating, or like coffee that you're drinking, we're not going to get a big CRP, but we're going to get a lot of joint pain. So you get into really personalized nutritional analysis of the bloods, and you can actually explain, right, this blood test tells me you haven't got inflammation, but you have. Right. So that's the idea of it, because you're very experienced at this, right? I reckon if someone walked into that room now, apart from saying you need some pictures up on the wall, once they've told you what's going on, I reckon you'd be able to say, well, my gut feeling is this. You would know that because you know the environment. You've seen lots of people doing this way. And I think that's the thing. I'm quite passionate about this. Maybe that's coming across. That bloods are not numbers. They are people. People first, numbers second. And it should be that way around. If there's a clinical presentation of a problem, and gout is a classic, because I've had people with huge levels of uric acid and no gout, and I've had people with no uric acid to speak of, and their gout is terrible. Well, then you can look at them and say, right, okay, what are you doing? You having a lot of fruit? Yeah, I'm having a lot of fruit. Okay, right, okay. Well, let's just take that out. Let's see what happens. You don't need more expensive blood tests, and I think that's the thing. I might be shooting myself in the foot because, people do come for consults about bloods, but try some common sense things first. If you've heard Anthony Chaffee talk about the inflammation effects of caffeine, knock it out of your diet, or coffee. Take it out of your diet. See if that works. Save yourself a fortune. Do something like that. And this is where carnivore is brilliant, because it's the total elimination of foods. It doesn't mean you can never eat them again. You could go lion. You could think, right, okay, I have now established it is food. That's what's brilliant about this. They go lion, wow. Everything clears up pretty much. Right, okay. Now, don't be stupid and start introducing everything. Introduce one thing. You like pork. You used to eat a lot of pork. Put pork back in. See what happens. I put pork back in. It's great. 6 weeks. I can, it's great. I feel great. Right. It doesn't seem to be pork. Hey, let's do the big one. Let's put the dairy back in. 4 weeks later, inflammation, brain fog, whatever. I'm not anti-dairy, by the way. It's just a common culprit that causes a problem. So that's it. And then you get that informed consent within your own personal space. Right. If I want to feel a bit groggy for 3 days, I am going to go and have that. I'm going to pig out. I'm going to have some yogurt, and I'm going to really enjoy this, that, and the other at my auntie's house. At least I know that when I stop it, by Wednesday, I'm going to be fine again. And I think that's the thing. I want to live in the real world. I don't want people to think I'm never going to have this again. I really, really like my yearly carrot cake on my birthday. right, have it. Just accept that tomorrow you're going to ache a bit, and then it's going to be gone. So yeah, I've gone off the blood test, but the blood tests are important because they do reveal things. I mean, it's not always a bed of roses. People will send bloods to me, and I'm like, wow, okay, you do need to do this follow-up test. You do need to do this because this is not a good look. So something like the liver enzymes doesn't happen a lot, and it very well. I don't have it with people that are carnivore for a long time. Normally, it's when they've come to carnivore, and it's the first 3 months. So it's probably something from the past. These enzymes, the liver enzymes, don't look good in relation to each other. Actually, that's another thing. It's not necessarily sometimes the absolute value of one thing. It's, with liver enzymes, you tend to do like a visual graph, and then you can see the ratios very easily, and then you can go, right, okay, you need this test because we just want to rule this out. It's more that than anything else. So, very rarely you do a melaminic test for B12, but some people might come in with incredibly high B12, but it doesn't seem to be working for them. So you can do a test, which is not a standard panel, that actually looks at whether that B12 is actually getting into the cell or whatever. So yeah, there's a lot to it. Sorry, I was going to give you a short answer, but I ended up giving you a long answer.
No, that's great.
But it is,
Yeah. No,
it's a passion of mine.
Yeah. No, yeah. No, that's great. And it's important to say these things. I mean, like you said, the reference ranges, they're different in every single lab. Why the hell is that? Because it's, and we as doctors and we as patients look at this and go, oh, I'm in the range. That's the optimal range. That's where I'm supposed to be. But that's not what that is. That's not an optimal range. That's just the average range for the community. But we're treating it as if it's an optimal range, but it's not an optimal range. So we need to
Can
recognize
I flip that very quickly? Can I just, sorry to interrupt, Anthony, but that's the other thing. That's the flip of it, is you'll get them and they'll be perfect. And the doctor will say, there's nothing wrong with you. And you go, but I'm in agony.
Yeah.
So that is the flip.
Yeah.
And that happens too. People will come and I'll say, your bloods are perfect, in inverted commas. So what's wrong? So that's another way of looking at it as well. And that happens. That does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I've spoken to many people who said that they go to their doctor and everything's fine. Their doctor says, yeah, no, look, everything's fine. It's like, yeah, well, I don't feel fine. So like, obviously you're just not seeing what's going on. And so, and that's another reason why I think that would absolutely revolutionize medicine. Just that if we actually used optimal lab ranges, that we were treating as optimal lab ranges, right? Because we're treating them as optimal, but they aren't optimal. And so if we started doing that, and then all of a sudden your doctor saw just like all these reds, just like, oh God, oh God, they would have to get up and do something. Well, they at least have something to go on. They say, okay, well, look, all this is out. Like we need to figure out what the hell is going on here. But the problem is that they don't. And so it was funny. There was I had a patient that was talking about that, and her GP was all excited after our consultation, and the patient was excited about our consultation, went to their GP and said, oh man, look, they explained all these reference ranges. I was like, oh no, that's ridiculous. And I was like, well, then why is it different in England and Spain and down the street at a different level? Well, the environment matters for B12. Okay. I guess just, thiamine just doesn't matter in Hungary. It's just like if everyone has berry, then no one has berry, I guess. It's just it's a very, very closed-minded way of thinking. It's just stupid, really, because it is an average. That's not, if people are sick in one area and the blood tests show that, and that doesn't mean that's normal. You're just showing that they're sick, and then we're just saying, no, it's normal because everyone's doing it. Everyone's blind and have have their limbs chopped off. Well, that's normal because everyone does that. So it's fine. In Rome, everyone had lead poisoning. Well, that's normal. You're supposed to be sick. And, it's like, no, it's not normal. It's just the norm. Just people have it. But no, I think that's very good to point out that that you have to understand the lab ranges and what they are. They're just averages, and to understand the lab tests, especially in the context of changing your diet as well, because it's very important. I was going to say as well, we were talking, before we hopped on, it is a bit of a non sequitur, but I really like something you said when we were talking about um, fiber and saturated fat. And I was sort of ranting about
Oh yeah, yeah.
some doctors that were going off about the keto diet. Oh, is the keto diet any good? And these guys literally had no idea what they were talking about. I think everything they do is scripted. They're almost certainly paid shills. They've done things on Ozempic and, talking about, oh, hey, yeah, well, Ozempic's good. And we'll talk to an endocrinologist. Oh, how great that is. I'm like, are you being paid by Ozempic? Like, I bet you are. And then they did some things for like Prime energy drink about, oh, hey, is this good or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you guys have to be getting paid for this. I mean, you're just embarrassing yourselves at this point. But they said that, that the ketogenic diet is good. Well, there's some uses for diabetes. Hasn't really been shown for mental health or anything else, but it's like long term. I mean, it doesn't have any fiber, so it's not going to be good long term. Like, yeah, it's all about the microbiome and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, failing to realize that ketogenic diets commonly use fibrous vegetables. And in fact, a lot of people think that's exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have a lot of vegetables, and so they didn't even realize that. So I mean, that's how little research these guys put into their videos, which is a shame because they have a big channel and a lot of reach, and they clearly just phone it in for these videos, which is just reckless. But you made a very good point about the fiber side of things and how they're a bit mutually they make some mutually exclusive statements. The same sort of people seem to contradict
Yeah.
themselves if you go into that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were talking about fiber, and I often use what is fiber. So it's an indigestible polysaccharide. So it's there's lots of sugar you can't eat, and these people don't like that sort of basis. But the big thing they always say is, well, it makes short chain fatty acids. Your fiber goes into your system, and then they make these short chain fatty acids. Well, what is a short chain fatty acid? It's a saturated fat. So these people are also the ones that tell you saturated fat is bad. So you need to get your act together, guys. Is it good or is it bad? Is the fiber producing a saturated fat that's good, and therefore saturated fat is good? Or is saturated fat bad, and therefore fiber is bad? I mean, that's actually the consistency. I'm always talking about common sense.
Yeah.
So which one is it? And that's the thing. Every single person that seems to push fiber also is one of those people that think saturated fat is bad. And yet their biggest selling point for fiber is that it makes short chain fatty acids for the bacteria. And that is a saturated fat.
Yeah.
It's literally clueless. And I would never come on here and think, right, I'm going to say something. And then at the end of it, I'm going to say something completely contradictory to what I said earlier. And if I did and I played it back, I'd be like, wow, that makes no sense. I've just said something that's nonsensical. I can't go out. One of those things has got to be true. So
Yeah.
they've got to drop one line. They can't have both. Simple as that.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing that these guys failed to understand too is like, where's the evidence that you need fiber for your microbiome anyway? That's assuming a fact that's not in evidence. There's no actual hard data showing that. I mean, there may be some uh, associative studies. There's no experimental data showing that fiber in all situations improves the composition and diversity of your microbiome. If anything, it would be plant-based processed food diet that is lacking in fiber, and then eating more whole food diet that has more fiber, and more fiber, better microbiome. It's like, okay, is that the case in carnivores if you're only eating healthy meat, right? So where's that study? Oh, well, yeah, there was one that with just looking at the Inuit and looking at their microbiome, and it's extremely healthy and diverse. And so, well, there goes that theory that you have to have fiber. And then what is happening in the real world with people that are trying this? They're going on a clean omnivorous diet with plenty of leafy green vegetables and fiber, or even like a clean keto diet with plenty of fibrous vegetables, and they're dropping all vegetables, all fiber, only going meat, and their microbiome was actually improving. Ben Azadi just talked about this a couple weeks ago, that he's been clean keto for years, and he got his microbiome tested, and it was all right. A lot of meat, a lot of fiber, a lot of plants, no sugar, no crap, average sort of microbiome. And the suggestion was eat more fiber, eat more leafy greens, eat less red meat, eat less meat in general. And that's the recommendation. But what's it based on? Right? It's based on nothing. And so what did he do? He did the exact opposite of what they recommended. He got rid of all fiber, got rid of all plants, and only ate meat, and mostly red meat. And a few months later, he had an exemplary microbiome with beautiful diversity and all the microbes that you wanted, and in perfect levels. So, again, it's literally zero research on the part of these guys, and but that pushes out these false narratives, and then you get these internet professors that saw one video by these guys, and then they just assume that they're correct, and that without any evidence either being asked for or provided. I looked in the study. There's no studies listed showing anything backing up anything that they said. There's absolutely nothing to show the veracity of the claims that they've made. And we can just see in simple real world terms, that does not happen. What happens is when people drop plants and fiber and only eat meat, their microbiomes improve. And if it doesn't agree with the experiment, it's wrong. It doesn't matter what your theory says.
Yeah, and I think that you hit the nail on the head there about like the diversity, because actually the definition of a healthy gut microbiome, and this is honestly true because I've looked into this, is the microbiome held by a healthy person. So you get this circular. There's no actual definition, and when they do the labs, and I'm speaking to a lab about this actually, I mean 50% of that matter that's gone to be sampled is unknown. It's still unknown. There's so many bacteria that are unknown and unclassified. So firstly, it's a really big guess. Secondly, there is a problem because they also base some of their testing on previous assumptions about, say, saturated fat. So just going off the microbiome, but if you look at omega-3, if you have higher levels of saturated fat or evidence of saturated fat in your sample, because the mainstream says saturated fat is bad for you, you get a bad score on your omega-3. Simple as that. It's nothing to do with an absolute level of omega-3. So a lot of testing lacks that context. I mean, I haven't got into those other tests yet, and I am looking at those now and talking to labs about that because I've done bloods for years and years and years. I felt I could get into this. I used to offer the private blood tests in the clinic before the restrictions and stuff, and seen thousands of bloods. Well, I haven't done thousands of microbiome tests and omega-3 tests, but I have lots of clients that are starting to do that, and I am seeing trends where it's still basing the results or the conclusions on assumptions, not on absolute levels and on no actual facts. Because when, not challenged is possibly the wrong word, but when I approached the lab for sort of confirmation of how they've arrived at this conclusion, it's never forthcoming. They can't do it. They can't do it. And, and again, it's an industry I'm not knocking. It's just something I'm interested in, like the hair analysis. I deliberately did some hair analysis at the same time as I did some sort of poop and saliva tests and stuff like that. And they don't match up at all. And according to my hair analysis, the last thing I should be eating is red meat. So, it's wrong. It's categorically wrong, flat out wrong. And some of the foods that I should be eating more of, allegedly, when I did eat them, I had the worst health ever. Now that's an N=1, but let's double that because my wife did it at the same time. Exactly the same thing. Things she definitely categorically does not, thrive on, she should be eating. And my one, just to get a bit more personal, up until age 50, I was hospitalized 3 times from eating cod, where it wasn't in a list of ingredients, by the way. I'm not an idiot. I didn't eat cod 3 times over my life and get hospitalized. Cod was put in these fish cakes and stuff like that and not listed. Well, apparently cod is the thing I should be eating. I should be eating tons of cod. But I've been hospitalized I mean, seriously, hospital. The last time it was so bad, the junior doctors. I was in a sort of on a bed with a a thin curtain around me, and the doctor would put his head in, look at me. All right, okay, like that. And second one. By about the fifth one, I'm like, could you just tell me what's going on? And they said, oh yes. The consultant said, you've got to go and see this, guys. This
Yeah.
is horrendous. So,
Oops.
so swollen and stuff. But anyway, according to my hair analysis, that's the food I should be eating. But I
Yeah.
can categorically say it isn't. So, I mean, it's interesting that you're getting into this because the testing is very nuanced, and it is the person has to go first. You treat the
Mm.
person, not the numbers. The
Yeah.
numbers can help you. They certainly can, indicate trends. But if your premise at the beginning is incorrect, and again, I mean, Phil Escott and Ben, I think you're doing a thing with them. I did their War on Health talk, and I went into Chat GPT and I put in, what is the average speed of a male of age 30 over 100 meters? How long should it take
Mm-hmm.
for them to run that? Now, Chat GPT said 10 seconds. Oh, yes, the reaction is exactly right. Now, there's my false premise. There is my false premise
Mm.
that people should be running, an average male should be able to run the 100 meters in 10 seconds, right? Well, as soon as you believe that from the mainstream, then everything else is skewed. So if I have somebody come in, you come in as a client of mine, and I say, Anthony, how quick are you over 100 meters? Well, I can do it in 14 seconds. I'm like, oh, what's wrong with you?
Mm.
Wow. In reality, that's pretty quick. And you just have this, this domino effect. And, going back to things like LDL, when you start with fraud, you have this huge domino effect of rubbish data. And you make all these conclusions about people. The joke was, I put a slide up of Phil Escott just slightly behind Usain Bolt.
Mm.
That's not true. It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But that could be taken as fact. And if it's, ChatGPT, everyone talks about how, bad it is, and it is really bad.
Mm.
But it's supposed to be the all-seeing artificial intelligence that can answer any question, right? So a novice out there will go, oh, really? Wow. I'm really, really slow. I mean, I take 19 seconds. That's really bad. And that's sort of analogous of what we've been talking about with the bloods and stuff like that, or, these idiot doctors. If you believe something, and again, going back to, this false premise, there's also this, it's healthy by proxy because, oh, this food is really good because it lowers your risk of cardiac disease. Okay. So, well, how did you get to that claim? Oh, because it lowers LDL.
Mm.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is you have no proof
Mm-hmm.
because you're using the proxy. Just because it lowers LDL, you've got to believe that LDL lowering is good for your heart for that food to be worth it. And that happens. I mean, there's hundreds of examples of that where they say that's going to lower your risk of cardiac disease, and it's all based on the fact it lowers your LDL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, so speaking of which, you mentioned at the beginning here that after a lifetime of doing it right and doing everything the right way, that you were sick and you had a CAC score, up over 600.
639, yeah.
Yeah. How has that changed? Have you gotten that tested since then? Like, how are you doing now?
Right. Okay. The reason I'm a bit flushed is because I played soccer, right? And I'm 60. Right now, at 23, I was told I'd be in a wheelchair by 50. I was shown very convincing images that I was going to be in a wheelchair by 50. I was also told my hearing wouldn't get better. And I did say I'd save a kicker to the end. All right. So here I am at 60, playing five-a-side soccer, coming in, doing an interview. No problems whatsoever. No sign of a wheelchair. 50, I should have been in a wheelchair. 60, I'm not. But I'm still flushed. So, I can get out there. Right. Now, the CAC, due to the restrictions, there's a huge waiting list for a scan. So I haven't had a scan. I was going to have another scan, but I'm going to wait until the waiting list has gone down because I'm not going to take this for biohacking purposes. I can't take the place that somebody else who might need it because they're seriously ill. I can't jump the queue like that. There's too big a waiting list. as soon as that waiting list from the NHS has gone down, then I will just pay for a test and I'll come back and tell you. Well, what I can definitely tell you is my hearing slightly improved.
No.
So this audiologist, same machine, like I say, so, not straight away, because obviously he wouldn't be old enough, but 23, I had these things and it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then it started to slow off, but it was still getting worse. And then when I went carnivore, I had a tick up. I'm not saying my hearing's great. I still need my hearing aids, still need the kit, still need the subtitles. But so my audiologist, who is now a friend, and I was texting him and stuff like that. So we, years and years and years. The reason I say that is because even though he knew me, he would not believe that eating this way could make a difference. And I said to him, look, I'm really boring. I do the same training. I eat the same food. I live in the same area. I don't do smoking or drinking. The only thing that's changed is what I'm eating. That is the only reason. Can only be that. It's like, it just can't be. I'm like, well, I think it is. I think it's localized inflammation. It's just gone down. My eustachian tubes, whatever it is, the mechanisms. I mean, this is my honours degree was all in this. I was very interested in the somatosensory part of the brain, and descending pathways and ascending pathways of pain and all that. And hearing was one of those things, and perception. So it's really interesting for me that a simple thing has helped. I think it's just down to the localized inflammation just improving from the environment that I'm eating. And I think it would have been nice to have that data, but obviously that's data, it's really difficult to get, and the NHS are not great at giving you your own medical records and things. But it's provable by I'll just show you. Actually, I have an app on my phone for my hearing aids, and this isn't actually it wants me to I'd do an upgrade, but anyway, let's forget that. Right. So there's the app. I can't really show you, but that's the volume. I used to have it right the way over to where the speaker is. And now it's not even halfway.
Yeah.
So not the most technical thing there. Didn't look great, but that's never happened. So even now that's better than it was even a year ago. Nice. Because it was, it was full blast, and then it was like 3/4, and it's starting to edge to sort of halfway. And it's only in the last year it's gone to less than half. And I used to have to do different things all the time, like in the car, because the noise of the car, people with hearing aids would get this, dialogue is not as easy to pick up mechanically, with amplifiers and that, as like car noises or background noises. So if I was in the car, I'd have to actually take it right down to 0 to make it bearable to be in the car. So this is like the reverse. I can leave it on the same thing. So when I get out of the car, I can still hear. And what used to happen was I'd have it right down low so the car noise didn't upset me. And then I would get out of the car, forget that I'd done that, walk into like the petrol station to pay for the gas, and oh, hang on, I've got to turn my hearing aids up. I can't hear anything. Well, I don't have to do that anymore. So, not a big deal, but it is a deal. That is a big difference to me. And 11% of adult males allegedly have hearing loss. So there's probably more people interested in that than you realize. So yeah, I think for me, I've gone from worrying about my heart, thinking I've got colon cancer, thinking that I wouldn't walk by the time I got to 50, to realizing I'd been completely and utterly lied to all my life about training and nutrition. And I got to 50 to realize that, I need to wake up, look at the common sense of what's being told to me. I mean, even in this walk of life, if you say something to me I've never heard before, I'm not just going to go, oh, it's Anthony, it must be true. I want to find out. I'll find out about it. And, I think that's the way I'm living my life. And I know I did a jokey thing about, I'm not going to let my education get in the way of learning new stuff. I think that's what I love about listening to you and people like Ken Berry and Zoe Harcum, Kelly Hogan, all of it, and Sean Baker, is I'm open, Ben Bickman, and the list is endless. I just want to keep listening to everything, reading books. I also deliberately listen to what the other side is saying, because I think we need to know what science they're presenting, what their, what their take on things is. We're animal lovers, right? Richard Smith and I did a thing about vegans versus carnivores, and we were saying we love animals. I don't hate animals, but I know for a fact that carnivore kills much less of the animal kingdom than being a vegan.
Yeah.
And that's something that vegans need to look at and actually be open to. What are they saying? Only this morning I put something on social media, which was a picture of some cows in a dairy facility. I said, look, I'm a carnivore. I hate this picture. This is awful. This video. I'm an animal lover. I want them out in the grass. I do not want them tethered by the neck with stuff attached to them, just milking them constantly in this atmosphere of boredom. I said, but you're filling up this thing with the answer is to go vegan. Well, it isn't. The answer is to go to the food producers and say, let's clean up the whole operation. So if you want to be vegan, I'm okay with that. You want to do that and you have your own reasons, but don't pretend that you're not killing animals. Don't pretend that it is the elixir of life and good for health, because it needs supplementation for you to be proper and healthy. I don't care if someone thinks that I'm talking out of my arse, as long as they've researched it and can give me a good reason why I am. But they never do. They just get really personal. And I just feel that it's something that it's very divisive, and that's deliberate. The food producers love it, because while we're arguing, they can get on with their terrible practices. They can spray glyphosate over everything. They can let Bill Gates block out the sun and buy up all the farmland. How ridiculous, So for me, it's been the best thing I've ever done going carnivore, because not only has it made me feel healthy and opened up my mind to, a lot of things, it's opened up my eyes to the entire world and the politics. I used to be really upset with Sean Baker when I first was at MeatRx, which is now Revero, because I used to think he talked about politics too much, and it's so intertwined: the food production, the politics, pharmaceuticals, control of human beings. It's really opened up my mind to what's really going on, and I do put that down to carnivore. And I definitely think a lot of vegans are malnourished and not getting energy to the brain because they can't see it. They just can't see it. They can't see that animals die to produce veg. I grew for it in veg, and it was like Fort Knox. I killed everything within the vicinity because otherwise I'd have nothing to eat. So I've been there. But you see, it's pernicious, isn't it? All the this is bad, methane, and it gets into people. It brainwashes them, and we need to say, look, methane is recycled. There's no extra methane. If you're into science, you understand you can't make methane out of nothing. It's a cycle. It takes 12 years. So yeah, emissions from a cow, you could say if you look at it 1 year, there is a problem, but there isn't. If you do it over 12 years, it's a net zero. And vegans don't even want to listen to basic science. The water cycle, the methane cycle, CO2. It's really fired me up, actually. And I think at 60, I should be maybe, getting my pipe and my slippers and sitting by the fire. But I just feel I'm going to be more and more active, and I can't wait to get to 70, because I'm going to be running 100 meters in 10 seconds.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's average after all, So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. Well, Stephen, that was great. I really appreciate that. That was absolutely wonderful. And I think everyone's going to really appreciate that. And, especially going into all the details about the blood tests and things like that, because it's something that comes up all the time. It's a very practical issue that people are rightly concerned about and need to know more about. So thank you very much for that. How does everybody find you? Can you tell us your channels and social media where people can find more?
Yep. My website is theukcarnivore.com. I have an app on Apple and Google when you can just type in the Carnivore Experience. Richard Smith and I also have a community, a school community, SKOOL, and that's just called the Low Carb School. Richard Smith's a pretty cool guy. So that's a really nice community. I have my books on Amazon. or I'll give Anthony links for the ebooks, which is my stand store. So yeah, the UK Carnivore, or you can look at Coach Stephen or Stephen Thomas, Bachelor of Science, my YouTube channel. So yeah, there's plenty of places to find me.
Perfect. Well, we'll put those links up in the description. People can click down there and find your work. Stephen, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's been an honor. Thanks for having me on.
Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.